letting people in continually, but for now, it's time for the candidates debate. Thank you all for coming. Before we begin, I guess I'll introduce myself. My name is Pooja. I'm the Chief Electoral Officer. Ben, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Ben. I'm the Deputy Electoral Officer.
And we'll be moderating tonight. Before we begin, we'd like to acknowledge that the SSMU is located on land which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange among indigenous peoples, including the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations. SSMU honors, recognizes, and respects these nations as the traditional stewards of the lands and waters on which Montreal is located. All right. So the itinerary for tonight, we're going to start off with the VP Finance, followed by the candidates for VP University Affairs, and then VP Internal, followed by a brief 5-minute intermission. And then after the break, VP External, presidential candidates, and ending with the VP Student Life candidate. So the way things are going to work tonight, we'll be proceeding with questions from the current SSMU executive, then the SSMUnian, and then questions from the online form. We received over 60 questions from the online form, so unfortunately we will not be able to ask all of them. And then there will be a space for audience questions. So if you have a question for a particular candidate and would like to ask a question, please use the raise hand function and we will try and call on you.
All right, so I'm going to be moderating the VP Finances debate section. So Eric, I'm going to spotlight you on the Zoom so everyone can see you. All right, if everyone can see Eric, and yeah, we're ready to go, I guess. So I'll have the timer up on the screen just to kind of run through what we're going to be doing for the debate. You'll have 1 minute first to give an opening statement. Then we'll have 2 questions from the current executive in this position. And then I believe there's one question for this position from the SSMUnian. Then we're going to have 3 questions that were submitted through the Google form. And then we're going to have time for 2 audience questions and a closing statement. So every response is 1 minute. So with that, I think we'll get started. Eric, if you want to give your opening statement, I can unmute you.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Bonjour à tous. My name is Eric, and I'm running currently for the position of VP Finance. I'm currently a U3 student in the Faculty of Arts, majoring in economics and minoring in both history and mathematics. In my past 3 years, I've participated in a variety of groups, clubs, and activities at McGill, whether as a frosh leader, participating in one of Democrats Abroad's mock debates, or in my extensive work with an IRSM. In the past 2 years, I've served on the executive, the McGill Model United Nations team, first as Director of Crisis, and this past year as Deputy Head Delegate. It is in this role that I've overseen both the financial organization of the team, as well as working with the equity procedures that guarantee a safe and inclusive environment for our entire team. My vision for the finance portfolio of SSMU is based on 3 pillars: reform, advocacy, and accessibility. This includes a push to reform our current ancillary fee structure, pressuring the Quebec government to re-regulate international tuition fees, and push for increased transparency and bilingualism in the work done in the finance portfolio. I hope to be able to answer any and all questions tonight in regards to my platform and my plans for the upcoming year.
All right, thank you, Eric. So now we're going to move on to the executive questions. I'm going to unmute Gifford, who's the current VP Finance, and he's going to ask you a couple of questions, and I'll have those up on the screen.
Hey, everyone. So my name is Gifford. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the current Vice President Finance. So I have 2 questions for you today, Eric. I'll start with the first one. So in what ways do you see the role of the Vice President Finance and the finance portfolio changing or adapting as SSMU moves back into in-person activities alongside McGill? And how do you think the Vice President Finance can help with the ease of this transition for the society?
Thank you for your question. I think in general, one of the important roles, or I guess the most important roles of the Vice President Finance portfolio is its ability to kind of support and be the logistical underbelly of SSMU. And I think that's going to be something that's definitely going to be at the forefront as clubs start to move back in person. A lot of people and a lot of students at McGill generally have said that their first year, especially because of the COVID restrictions and the fact that it was done online, has been very alienating. And so clubs, I hope, are going to be a very, very good way for students next year to actually be able to interact with one another and be able to kind of get back into the flow of things that we kind of lost due to COVID. And so I think a big part of how the VP Finance and the finance portfolio is going to support that transition is by making sure that clubs have access at all times to the finance portfolio, are able to come and ask questions, and students who maybe want to start a club and start to get involved on their own terms have the opportunity to be directly involved with the finance portfolio.
All right, thank you so much. And this next question, this is actually a question that I was asked last year, and I think it's important that I guess each VP Finance candidate gets asked this. So shout out to Sam, I think you're in the crowd right now. But anyways, I'll, I guess, go right into it. So do you think the role of the Vice President of Finance is political? If so, which aspects of the role? And if not, why not?
So first of all, everything's political. I don't think you can get away with saying that things aren't. It's something that I spoke about on my platform extensively. I would urge anyone who wants a more in-depth answer to look there, as well as if you feel comfortable, come talk to me afterwards. But essentially, there is a fine line that needs to be followed. I do not want to be in a situation where someone comes to ask and to request funding for a club and gets denied that and thinks it's because I have some sort of political opposition to whatever their club is running. At the same time, however, the finance portfolio needs to guarantee a baseline of human rights and a baseline of respect for the community. And that means not accepting clubs or topics that deal with or attack groups of a certain nature. I think the best place for the finance portfolio's advocacy to work is on things that are broadly supported by students at SSMU and within McGill, and that means focusing on things like re-regulating international tuition, where there won't necessarily be a lot of fighting on both sides, but something that we can universally agree would make student life better.
All right, thank you, Gifford, and thank you, Eric. So we're now going to move on to the question from the SSMU Union. I believe someone from the SSMU Union is going to ask the question. So yeah, Belle, I will.
Yes, hello.
Hi. All right, yeah. So yeah, you can ask your question.
Okay, wonderful. Hi, I'm the president of the SSMU Union, the labor union that represents SSMU's employees. And the question that we have for you is, as VP Finance, where will fair compensation for labor fall on your priority list? How will you balance it with SSMU's other financial needs as collective bargaining comes to a close?
Thank you for your question, Belle, and thank you for the good work that you've done with the SSMU Union. I think fair pay is very high on my list of priorities for a few reasons. Number one, the institutional turnover at SSMU is quite high because VP positions and executive members change every year. And so we are incredibly reliant on the experience and on the abilities of our employees. And so making sure that they're treated fairly and and compensated fairly is not only a question of guaranteeing fair labor rights for our workers, but also guaranteeing the long-term sustainability of SSMU. In that vein, something that I know has been brought up a few times is the way that contract work is done at SSMU, the way that people are paid for a certain amount of hours, and if the amount of time required to fill a project is greater than that, they either need to work unbilled or abandon the project. To me, that makes no sense, and I think it's something that I would definitely want to tackle quite early to guarantee that people that are working at SSMU are paid the amount of hours that they work at SSMU. And yeah, so that they're not forced to work for free to complete the projects that they worked so hard on.
All right, thank you, Belle and Eric. I'm just gonna quickly go back to this slide. So now we are gonna have 3 questions that came in from the Google form. Again, sorry if your question for Eric didn't make it, but there will be opportunities at the end, as you can see, for audience questions. So excuse me, I'm gonna be looking away because I'm reading them off another device. But yeah, I'll start with the first question. You stated that you would like to create financial workshops for services and clubs. Seeing as these workshops already happen, what ideas do you have to make them better than they already are?
Thank you for that question, whoever asked it. The main thing that I would like to look at differently is going to be in relation to the reforms I'm suggesting to, for example, the services. So when it comes to implementing the solutions in the report that was published in February, that leads to a series of recommendations for how to propose fee increases and also how to manage budgeting, notably zero-based budgeting. And these are things that can require a lot of work and require a lot of understanding to work through. And so that's something that I really want to spend a lot of time on, to be very available to services throughout the summer and throughout the year, so we can help them develop these capabilities. As these reforms are put in, I think it's very important to continue consulting the services to make sure that none of these policies are stopping the excellent work that's being done by them. And so having those workshops in place to guarantee those changes to budgeting systems and changes to the way ancillary fees are requested, I think is going to be very much necessary moving forward.
All right, thank you. I'm going to move on to the second question. What experience made you decide to run for this position? Do you believe that your lack of involvement and knowledge of the inner workings of SMU governance is a deficit in understanding and overseeing the duties expected of your position?
I think that in general, there's a lot of things that made me run. I personally have been always very interested in positions since I've actually come to McGill. It's something that I've thought about for a very long time. Over this past year, dealing actually with the financial nitty-gritty of an organization has made me definitely come to appreciate the sort of work that is done. But I agree that generally in SMU, I'm someone who hasn't been directly involved with SMU insofar as an elected position. But I think that's a reality that a lot of students at McGill actually experience. In fact, SMU, the actual amount of people who actually hold positions in SMU is a very small percentage of the student body that we need to represent in general. I think having a perspective of someone who's interacted with SMU significantly and worked with SMU, but not someone who's held a position in SMU, actually gives me an edge in that sense. I do not think it'd be useful if every executive member had the same background that I did, but I think that it adds an extra level of variety and a different level of insight that matters a lot when actually making decisions that impact the entire student body, including those who do not necessarily vote in these elections.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to move on to the third and final question from the form. You stated that you'd like to see tuition rebates for international students who study French at McGill. Tuition rebates already exist on these courses. Any international or out-of-province student who takes a French course receives discounted tuition on these courses. How and why would you change this?
The current system is very good for those who follow those courses, but it only applies to those courses specifically. I would like to see a general rebate being applied across the board to have a lower cost for those who pursue French courses and French minors in general, because I think further incentivizing people to take these classes is good both for the province and good because it'll allow our students to pay lower fees. In this vein, something else that I mentioned in my platform is extending these sort of rebates to those who pursue accreditation and accredited classes in French outside of McGill. People following professional programs like law or medicine don't necessarily have the space to pursuing a French minor to take French classes to reduce their cost. And so allowing those students to still learn French, pursue French, and allow them to maybe work and stay in the province afterwards in exchange for giving them cheaper tuition rates, I believe is a very fair way of kind of enlarging the current program that already exists for lowering tuition rates in these specific classes.
All right, thank you. So we're going to move on now to the audience questions. If you have a question for Eric, please raise your hand. Huj, I might need your help calling on people because I can't see everyone in the meeting.
All right, Lauren, if you want to ask your question.
Yeah, hi, let me just turn my camera on. Hi, Eric, thank you for speaking to us. So I'm just wondering, just how do you, I know like there's a huge issue with in terms of making the VP Finance position more accessible and more transparent. So I'm just wondering what steps you've taken towards creating a finance portfolio that's more accessible to the broader SMU membership.
Thank you for the question. That's always a very hard question because the actual amount of interest that there is often to join and to look into the actual finances of SMU is quite low. And so it often requires the finance portfolio to go out of its way to inform its members. And yet I think it's something that is incredibly important for us to do. So the first step that I would like to do is combine the bi-monthly reports that are given to Ledge Council by the finance portfolio into a singular document and email it out to the student body. Generally push it out there as much as possible and demonstrate what was actually done by the finance portfolio that month. Another very important project that I would like to pursue is finally translating a lot of the finance documents at SMU. Since 2018, no finance document outside of the "Where is my money going" document has actually been translated, including budgets and financial statements, and the report on ancillary fees that recently came out. And I think actually making those available to our French population is incredibly important to guarantee that everyone at McGill can have the same level of access to our financial services. And I ran out of time, but also the continuing to work on the finance website and finally getting that set up. It's also an excellent way to increase accessibility.
Okay, does anyone? Yeah, I can see. Who did you want to? I can't see.
Brooklyn, if you want to ask your question.
Sorry, I don't want to get ahead of myself. I know I have time allocated to myself, but Eric, your platform includes plans for, I think it was a 5-year transition towards consolidated fees. In doing so, how do you plan on protecting the honestly already strained relationship that SMU has with its services as we move towards a consolidation?
Sure, yeah. Thank you, Brooklyn, for your question. I think it's important to, number one, guarantee that there's a lot of consultation that continues to happen with the services. I know that there was consultation in the production of the report, but many services complain that it was presented more as being consulted on solutions, while the report described these consultations more as a investigation. And so that's something that I generally want to move away, and I want to move more towards a conducive relationship with the services. Something else in that vein that I stress a lot in my platform is the idea that the consolidation of fees needs to happen while earmarking the same amount of money to the services as were given prior to fee consolidation. In a way, almost grandfathering this money to the services to guarantee that there's not the kind of cuts that we have seen almost threatened in the past by the finance portfolio, or the idea that the surplus money is going to be taken away. I do not believe that that is a conducive way to build a relationship with the services, and it's something without a doubt I would avoid at all costs. I think services know what they're doing, and we need to take advantage of that expertise when making the decisions that we do when moving forward with fee consolidation.
All right, thank you very much, Eric. We'll remove the spotlight. And then we're going to move on now to the VP University Affairs.
The closing statement.
The closing statement. I'm so sorry. Yeah, you have 1 minute for a closing statement.
Thank you. So first, I'd just like to thank everyone for their excellent questions and for coming here tonight to interact with SMU and participate in student politics. I've always firmly believed in the necessity of the student body's role in overseeing SMU's executive team and guaranteeing that those offering their candidacy are properly held accountable. My vision for the coming year is based on smart and sustainable finances and a reinvigorated push to make our student body as connected to the finance portfolio as ever. In this vein, if you have any questions or concerns about either my platform or the answers I've provided this evening, please reach out to me. This can be done either at my email, eric.sater@mail.mcgill.ca, or through Facebook. Both of these pieces of contact information should be available on my platform, on my Facebook campaign event, or on the SMU executive election page. I've always firmly believed in the necessity of open door policies. I'll continue to extend this philosophy into my tenureship as VP Finance in the event that I am elected. I wish you all a good rest of your evening, and please continue to stay safe and healthy as we continue to face the COVID pandemic, especially as we are hopefully reaching the end of this tumultuous time. In addition to this, also, good luck to the rest of the candidates.
All right, thank you now. Now we're going to move on to the University Affairs. All right, so we have Neil and Claire running for University Affairs. Again, same idea, 1 minute opening statement, I think 3 executive, I believe there's a general question and then 2 specific questions for each candidate. And then the candidates will be able to ask each other a question, and the other candidate will have a 1 minute response followed by a 30-second rebuttal. And then we'll have 2 questions from the SMUnion, 1 general question from online, 2 candidate-specific questions from online. Then we will have 2 audience questions and closing statements. So with that, Neil or Claire, would one of you like to go first?
Claire, your name is first alphabetically, so you want to begin.
Yeah, that works for me. Thank you. Waiting for the timer to start. My name is Claire, and I'm running to be SMU's next VP University Affairs. The upcoming year is not going to be business as usual at SMU or McGill, and I intend to advocate for what students and the greater Montreal community need in terms of COVID-19 safety and academic accessibility. The UA portfolio is expansive, and there's any number of great parts of it to focus on. This year, however, I believe the main priorities have to be the protection of academic rights and COVID-19 safety for any in-person instruction, which go hand in hand. I plan to advocate for a basic standard of safety rights for any in-person instruction and ensure that accessible remote learning options remain available for anyone who chooses them. My other ideas include making study hubs and libraries better, given the hand we've been dealt with COVID, and working on ongoing issues of accessibility. I've worked in the UA portfolio for 2 years. I've helped organize this SMUnion, and I have a great deal of other experience in McGill and the greater Montreal communities. I'm ready for this job and whatever the challenges of the next year will bring.
Thank you, Claire. Neil, if you want to go, you have 1 minute.
All right, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name is Neil Soman, and I am running to be your next VP University Affairs. Now, before I begin, I'd like to wish best of luck to Claire, my opponent. I had a chance to speak with Claire over the weekend, and I'm pleased to report that we are very much aligned on a lot of things, especially when it comes to our return to campus. We share a lot of these same concerns. When it comes to accountability and accessibility, we share a lot of these same concerns. Where we differ, however, is the lived experience and perspectives from McGill and the greater Montreal and world communities that we can bring to SMU. Now, the 2 most important issues that I wish to highlight are minority communities on campus, especially our Francophone students, as well as sexual violence. In my time at McGill, of course, I've been a part of residence councils. I've been a part of a McGill sports team. I have organizational experience by volunteering through national sporting bodies. And I believe that I'm very qualified to make this place a home for all of us, a place that we all have someone that we can rely on. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. So now we're going to move on to the executive questions. And so, Brooklyn, if you want to ask your questions.
Thank you. Yeah. It happens every time. I always go to unmute myself and then accidentally mute myself. Thank you for that. Okay, so yes, like Ben mentioned, I actually have 3 questions. Sorry to the other executives. 1 for each candidate and then 1 general question. So I will start with the candidate-specific questions before ending with the general question. And I will start in the order that the candidate spoke. I'll start with Claire. Claire, your platform included a research position to examine McGill's COVID-19 policies. How do you plan on ensuring that student voices are included in McGill's pandemic-related decision-making moving forward, specifically anything new that we aren't already doing?
I'm not allowed to unmute. Oh, I've been unmuted. Sorry, it wouldn't let me unmute myself.
Okay, I reset your time for you. All right.
Take those 7 seconds. Thank you. That's a really important question. I have spoken about this with someone before, I believe the Tribune, but I really believe in the power of circulating a form widely to making sure it's in a wide variety of platforms to make sure that many students have the opportunity to share their voices, both with numerical ways of expressing what's going on and places for individual testimonials. I think that's a really great way to make sure student voices are heard. And
I would definitely be amenable to providing honorariums for students whose voices we especially want heard, students of color, queer students, people whose voices we really want to make sure are included in informing the data that we have. And I think people are excited to share their opinions honestly. They want to feel heard.
Okay, thank you, Claire, for that answer. So moving on next to Neil. All right. Neil, votre plateforme comprenait un plan exigeant que les droits linguistiques soient inclus dans les programmes de cours. Puisqu'il s'agit déjà d'une exigence, comment vous assurez-vous que cette exigence est respectée? And then in English, Neil, your platform included a plan which would require the linguistic rights or the francophone rights of students to be included in course outlines. Since this is already technically a requirement, how will you ensure that this requirement is followed and enforced among course lecturers?
Yeah, thank you very much, Brooklyn. It's a fantastic question. You know, what I've noticed, and several of my peers have noticed, is that, you know, while this is a requirement, a lot of instructors and professors will either omit this, you know, French aspect for submitting written assignments, omit this from their syllabi, or, you know, some professors have said things, especially in the Faculty of Science, I've noticed, you know, you have the right to do this, but please don't, because I don't speak French and I don't want to deal with it. Right? This is a very negative attitude, and I think the first thing that we can do is make sure that there are people that are there to grade these, you know, grade works in French. You know, if in an ideal world, every class would have a TA speaking French. This is obviously impossible because we don't have that many grad students. But if every department can have someone on hand fluent in French, that will increase the incentive for people to submit things in French, and of course, then professors will be comfortable putting this on their syllabi.
All right, thank you, Brooklyn. Oh, we have the general questions still.
Thank you, Neil. Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, yes, I am borrowing this question from my predecessor, Madeline Wilson, who, unlike Sam, I know for a fact is not here. But quite simply, does McGill, as an institution, care about its students? If yes, how would you explain McGill's history of disregarding student concerns? And if no, what should we be doing that we aren't already doing to hold the university accountable? Thank you in advance for your answers.
If whoever wants to go first, you can just jump in and let me know.
Well, Claire still seems to be stuck on mute because.
Oh yeah, sorry.
All right, I can take this if you'd like. Does McGill care about its students? Yes and no. You know, at the end of the day, this is a business. This school that we are in is a business. They're here to teach us, yes, but they're also here to, you know, get our tuition money. That being said, the professors, the faculty, I've noticed so many of them care so passionately about our students, and especially in this challenging year. You know, we talk a lot about what academic resources can be made available to students, and what degree of flexibility instructors have with their teaching, especially now. And you know, there's a lot of work to be done, but so many professors have really tried within their technical limitations to make this happen. In order to hold the university more accountable as the institution, as the, you know, higher ups, the faculty, the board of governors, this is where SMU comes in. We need to have more town halls between SMU and its students so that we can really hear everyone's voices, not just at a GA once a year.
Hi, sorry, someone outside my door. I would say that McGill, writ large, cares about its students, but there's a huge misalignment of the values which kind of block McGill administration from taking concrete actions to care for their students, such as if you really valued the health, especially the mental health of your students, you would make the Wellness Hub more accessible for everybody involved. You would address ongoing concerns about mental health, Zoom University, everything like that. I also think McGill lets down the students it needs the most, or the students that need support the most. It's especially clear through the OSD, through the treatment of students of color at McGill, that often McGill doesn't prioritize groups that really need its support, and we need to be doing a lot more.
All right, thank you, Brooklyn, and thank you, candidates. We're going to move on to the questions from the SSMU. So I think Belle will be asking them again.
Hi, folks. The first question I have for the two of you is, what do you know about on-campus unions other than this union, and how do you intend to support them in your role as Vice President of University Affairs?
Belle, thank you for the question. Now, this is where I do have to be a little bit honest and say that I don't have a lot of experience working with SSMU and working with a lot of too many student associations here at McGill, right? This is going to be a learning curve for me. That being said, I really do understand the importance of labor unions, yours especially, and fair working conditions, right? Through my involvement in sport at McGill, I've had correspondence with faculty, with staff, and I've come to really understand that, to make things work, you need all these smaller parts to band together. So even though I can't, answer your question with any specific unions, because I just don't have that experience, I can tell you that, these are the people that I will be listening to the most, because these are people that know what they want and have this power to come together and make that happen.
Thank you, Belle. Lots of love for the SSMU. I think the mandate of the UA portfolio absolutely needs to include actions of solidarity with other unions. In particular, I think that consultation with AGSEM, which is the Association of Graduate Students Employed with McGill, is really important. The mandates of the SSMU, the SSMU, and AGSEM all sort of align, largely because the issues at hand are shared issues. If we're concerned about safe learning conditions, AGSEM has their TAs in there and their graduate students who are in precarious employment situations, so they're probably sharing those concerns with us. They also do a great deal of pop-ed, which is something that the UA portfolio and external do. I also do think that work with the MUSE and MCLIU would be beneficial, but I see collaboration with AGSEM being the most mutually important, because again, we are fighting for the same goal of safe in-person instruction, if that's what McGill is choosing to do next semester.
Thank you so much. The second question I had for both of you was, what are your plans for advocating for COVID safety regulations, with the understanding that McGill's regulations will be the one that SSMU is obligated to observe in its offices and in the university center where employees work?
I can start here. Sorry, I keep you on the spot. I really think, as I talked about before, this would be an excellent time to work with AGSEM, because over the summer they actually already have done a lot of work on safety conditions in McGill's buildings, because there was a point where McGill was looking like there was going to be some in-person instruction sometime this year. If they would allow me access to their findings or any sort of research that they've done, I would love to use that as a starting point. Once the semester begins, if there's any sort of in-person learning, I would also love to add a component of Know Your COVID Rights and Responsibilities into the existing Know Your Rights campaign that the UA portfolio does every fall. Your professors have the right to an environment where your professors are wearing masks. You have the right to be in a room that's a safe size. And I would also plan to create a form where students and anybody who's in the buildings could anonymously report conditions that they didn't feel were safe. Again, I feel there's not really room for compromise on this.
Yeah, thank you very much, Belle. And thank you, Claire, as well, for that fantastic response. When Claire and I had the chance to speak the other day, right, we were, as I mentioned before, very strongly aligned with our concerns regarding return to campus. When it comes to working conditions and when it comes to learning conditions, right, there's a lot to be wary of, and this is work that's going to have to start right away in June. And of course, I'm sure Brooklyn is already working on this now with Board of Directors and Senate. Right, the most important thing to do, of course, is, as Claire already mentioned, make sure that students are aware of what rights they have and make sure they have a way to let us know and let the school know when something is not following procedure, not following protocol. So my number one priorities on this front are, of course, to make a very clear, document that is accessible to everybody with lists of what the regulations are, how we can change them, and who we're going to talk to.
All right, thank you, Belle. So I'm just going to move back to this slide, and we're going to go on to the candidate discussion. So each of the candidates has a question they're going to ask the other candidates. That other candidate will have a minute to respond, and then a 30-second rebuttal. So with that, Neil, would you like to go first with your question?
So Claire, I want to ask, the main points of your platform address academic rights, accessibility, and COVID-19 safety. Now, of course, another major component of the UA portfolio is equity and advocacy. At this point, do you have any projects currently in mind?
Thank you so much for bringing this up. I actually did want to address this. When we spoke this past weekend, you felt very strongly about anti-sexual violence work. Sorry, I may have been frozen for a second. And I absolutely want to make sexual violence a priority. The truth was I wasn't comfortable taking credit in my platform for work that other people have been doing. I haven't done work with survivors. I haven't done anti-sexual violence mobilization work, and it would feel very wrong to make platform promises based on work that I hadn't myself done. So absolutely, this anti-sexual violence work is going to be a priority, but it's going to be done in collaboration with people who know what they're doing. I feel so strongly that it's a priority, but I wouldn't know where to start with it. And I want to make sure that the right people are being consulted, the right people being the Anti-Sexual Violence Mobilization Commissioner, SACOMS, the Union for Gender Empowerment, Queer McGill, and other groups like that.
Okay,
Yeah, no,
I'm just, sorry, Neil, I'm just gonna set up a 30-second timer if I can do that pretty quickly. Oh, okay, you wanna go now?
Sure. All right, thank you so much for that response, Claire. Now, I know this is supposed to be a debate, and we're supposed to be, opponents, but it's hard to say anything bad about this because, I see where you're coming from, and I see, that you really want to get things done. Now, I just want to bring up, of course, my own personal experience. I might be able to get things done faster because this has been my worldview. But no, Claire, you're fantastic, and I know you're going to do a great job.
All right, thank you, Neil. Claire, if you want to ask your question now.
Yeah, before I just want to say thank you so much again to Neil. You have been a true pleasure to be running against in this race, and I've really loved talking with you every time we've had the chance to do it. The question I had for you was what would you consider to be your most meaningful contribution to SMU or to the greater Mobile community?
Yeah, thank you, Claire. As I mentioned before, I've not done a lot of work directly with SMU. And even within, Montreal itself, I've not had the time to volunteer, to work with nonprofits. What I have had the time to do is work with universities. Now, I mentioned this very briefly when just before talking about sexual violence. I had a chat with some administrators at not McGill, at a different university that I'm not going to name, kind of going through their sexual violence policies, looking at what's wrong, how it can be fixed, and of course I'm not a student there, so who's to say if any of this gets adopted? But on this, I have experience looking through a lot of this. And of course, on the side, I volunteer a lot with national sporting governing organizations such as Skate Canada, Ice Skating Australia, and the Canadian Centre for Ethics in Sports.
All right, Claire, if you want to respond, and I'm just going to put the 1-minute timer up, but you can just stop around 30 seconds. That'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. The one thing I've been able to tell every time I've spoken with you is just your passion in anti-sexual violence work, and I think that if you're elected, the students would be just so lucky to have someone who's that passionate about that kind of work. I think it's absolutely essential, and I hope that whichever one of us wins will be able to bring that passion and advocating for survivors to the table.
All right, thank you. So we're now going to move on to the online questions. We have one question from the form that is for both candidates, and then we're going to have a question for each candidate that was submitted on the form. I think Fanta has a hand up. Just right now we're doing the online form questions, and then we'll have audience questions if it's a question. Okay. All right, so I'm going to ask the first question. This is for both candidates. The University Affairs portfolio involves quite a bit of advocacy work. How do you intend to advocate for marginalized students, especially groups that you are not a part of? And again, whichever whomever wants to go first.
Sure. Claire just spoke, so I think I'll take this one. Thank you so much for that question. Right. In SSMU and in University Affairs, we're very fortunate that there are so many sub commissions that we can work with. Of course, there's the Francophone Affairs Commission, the Black Affairs Commission, the Indigenous Affairs Commission. I've also recently heard there is a proposal to include an Asian Affairs Commission. I don't know kind of what progress has been going on that, but I would definitely be interested in looking into that. We have all these specialists that have these lived experiences and that are able to, let us know, everyone in university affairs know what the main issues that students are facing are. All this Francophone stuff I've talked about in my platform and today, I learned just by having a 20, 30-minute chat, most from the current Francophone Affairs Commissioner, Juliet, who's been amazing. So we have all these teams, and of course, I'm spunky and ready to fight, so let's go.
All right.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with a lot of what Neil said. The UA staff is awesome. I've been a part of that staff team for 2 years, and everyone in that portfolio is so dedicated to the work they do. It's just really awesome to see everybody's passion coming through for these amazing projects that the UA portfolio gets to work on. Like I had spoken about before in the SSMU question, I believe, about COVID safety, I also think that circulating a form and making sure that it reaches a wide audience of students is really important. I genuinely believe people want to share their opinion. They want to feel like their voice is being heard and they have a forum to voice concerns. And again, I do think providing an honorarium in instances for groups that you value their time, of course, and you want them to take the time to fill out these forms with the relevant information. I think that it's awesome, and it's not impossible to get a huge, diverse range of opinions.
All right, thank you. I'm going to move now to the candidate-specific questions, starting with Neil. One of your platform points is advocating for the right to submit work in French, but this is already a rule. Do you have other plans to improve the experience of Francophone students at McGill?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. I'm not a Francophone student, so a lot of this was news to me, the barriers that French-speaking students face. But as you start exploring it, it becomes more and more self-apparent. An easy example is, of course, the Office for Students with Disabilities. If you go into their website, we get a lot of information, some resources, and if you click the little French icon in the top right corner, you get a page that has your phone number, their address, and a fax number for some reason. That's about it. Even worse, of course, is the Wellness Hub. It doesn't even have a French website. Students have the right to, get all these services in French, but if it's so hard to access this information in the first place, what are we to do? Now, just last year, I believe, there was a referendum question to, add a fare to, hire French translation services, and this failed. I want to bring this up. I think this is a huge issue that we're missing here at SMU and here in McGill.
All right, thank you, Neil. So now I have a question for Claire.
I'm sorry, I'm unmuted, but I live on Saint Joseph, and there's a fleet of police cars.
Oh yeah, we can hear them.
Yeah, if you would want to just wait like 20 seconds, I think that would be better.
No worries.
All right, I think it's finally over.
Okay. All right. So this question's for Claire. Students with disabilities have often been overlooked by the university admin. Your point on note takers aligns with SMU's OSD-related statement that was released in 2020. Would you commit yourself to advocating for the other points from that 2020 statement, like the training of individuals who monitor OSD exams, among other policies?
Thank you for this question. I absolutely think that's vital. I actually have a personal horror story with that, where I wasn't able to ask questions of my professor because I was sitting in an OSD room, and that negative experience, I know I'm not alone in that. It's led other students to decide to just take their exams in the giant gym room without the proper accommodations that they need and that they deserve, because the OSD isn't able to meet the basic need of being able to ask your professor questions during an exam. So I think that streamlining that process is absolutely essential, making sure that the students with disabilities are given the basic rights that other students during exams are being given. I chose note taking because I know that this is going to be a very busy year that's going to be a bit of a scramble for academic rights, and I want to make sure that these are concrete goals I can achieve. I would love to reform the entire OSD, but unfortunately that would be way too large of a goal for one person to do in 1 year.
All right, thank you. So with that, we're going to move on to the audience questions. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. And Pooja, maybe you want to call. So again, I have a limited visibility.
Okay, first person I saw, Adrian. You should be unmuted now.
Hello, there we go. Hi, thank you to both of you for putting your names forward for this position. So as someone who's worked in the UA platform for the last 2 years, probably the most constant thing that the VPUA does is manage conflict. So that could be something like conflict between staff, conflict with admins, conflict with committees. How well do you manage conflict, and particularly how do you do in situations where people may disagree with you really vehemently, or where someone across the table doesn't really like you personally, but you still need to maintain a professional working relationship in order to advocate for students and their rights? Thank you.
Neil, if you're not jumping to speak, I can start.
Hey, go ahead.
I think that maintaining a harmonious relationship with people you're working for, with admin, forgive me, there was a lot in that question, so I'm just going to try to get as much as I can. Sorry, there's even more police cars. May I pass this to Neil?
Yeah, how about I take this and we wait
I'm so sorry for everybody.
Yeah, that's totally okay. Yeah, Neil, if you want to go.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, thank you, Adrian, for the fantastic question. And again, there are a couple things there. When it comes to resolving conflict, this is one of those things I've kind of done for a hot minute. When I was in high school, I was in my high school music council. I was president of that. We ran into several problems with our budget, things being reallocated within the school, things being reprioritized, and we really had to fight in order with our school administration, our high school administration, in order to get this done, right? And it's hard because these are personal things, especially if you or anyone here was ever a music student, that becomes your whole life when you're in high school. And it's easy to take these personally, but in order to get things done, we did successfully increase it 10% in our budget. You have to remain professional, you have to remain understanding, and you have to work together, of course. Our rivals athletics, we have to work together with them as well.
Okay, round two. If there are any more police cars, I'm going to lose my mind. Thank you for the question, Adrian. Oh my goodness. I have to assume there has been a murder or something on my street for all of that noise. I'm going to first say if this is a conflict between any employees in the SMU office, talk to your SMUnion. That's what they're there for, to manage interpersonal workplace conflicts. I would also say with speaking with admin, and please let me know if you can't hear me, that you want to go in with the intentions of having a harmonious relationship, but unfortunately that's not always possible because we're here to fight for what students need, and this year the stakes are just so high with COVID-19. It's not just about students, it's about the entire Montreal community. An outbreak on McGill's campus because of unsafe conditions would have massive repercussions, and I have every intention of respecting everybody's opinions there, but I don't believe that there's room for compromise with safe learning conditions.
All right, the next hand I saw was Fanta. You should be able to,
Okay, thank you. My question is more of a case study. So a student reaches out to you, they've experienced harassment and discrimination. This is a student in the Faculty of Law, so keep in mind that this is a very small faculty. They've spent months navigating the different McGill processes. They filed an official complaint to no avail. They've written to the provost and to the principal. Nothing has been done. And they reach out to your office for your intervention. What do you do? And in your answer, please include any relevant policies, processes, or mechanisms available in issues of harassment and discrimination.
Yeah, thank you, Fanta. This is an excellent question. Also, hi, Fanta. I wish you were up here with us, but it's nice to have you in the audience. McGill's got two policies that kind of go hand in hand. We've got the policy on harassment and discrimination prohibited by law, and we've got the policy against sexual violence. Now, we'll put this one aside for now. The policy on harassment and discrimination prohibited by law is not great. It's very confusing. It doesn't really give clear platforms for anybody. So, unfortunately, the first thing I want to do is, of course, simplify this, streamline this, and combine these. Unfortunately, I can't say that really provides a short-term solution. But, if any student is putting themselves forwards, if they would be willing to help us out by hearing their personal story and their experience, this can definitely be used, in testimonial when speaking with the Senate, when speaking with the governors in McGill, when we're working on revising these policies and seeing what we can do about them. But in that case, there's no immediate response. It's a process, unfortunately. But thank you.
I would first start with a compassion of, I'm so sorry that this is happening to you. This isn't fair. Unfortunately, the student is happening to you. You're not alone. And I would if I could not immediately think of the relevant people to refer the student to, which off the top of my head, I'm not sure who the best people are to speak with, I would work my contacts around SMU, around McGill, and figure out if there's someone there who is able to be supportive of someone going through this, who could help them navigate the process. I believe that the McGill Legal Aid Clinic has resources like this because they do issues pertaining to academic rights in addition to the law. And again, I would just love to try to support them any way that I could, but this, as Neil said, this isn't an easy problem, and I'm sorry that's happening.
All right, thank you, and thank you to the audience members who had questions. If you weren't able to ask your question, if you go to the Facebook event page, you'll be able to find a document where you can find all the candidates' information if you want to message them or send them an email. Or you could also just send it to us at elections@smu.ca, and we can relay it to the candidates. With that, we're going to go to closing statements. Whoever wants to go first.
Sure, I can go ahead. So, thank you so much to Ben and Pooja for hosting this debate this evening. And thank you to Claire for sitting down to speak. And it's been great to hear your ideas and hear your approach. What I've said all along throughout this race was that we might be rivals, but at the end of the day, we are playing for the same team. I think you have some fantastic ideas, and I think that if you were elected, you'd be great. I think if I was elected, I would definitely talk to you to hear some of what you want to see put in place as well. I think if there's any key differences that we've learned tonight, it's that what can I say? Claire is more focused on academic rights, and I'm more focused on human rights, both of which are hugely important because this is your school and this is your home. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I completely agree with everything Neil has said. This has been a true pleasure. I'm very thankful that this did not turn into a acrimonious situation. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here tonight. I'm super pleased to have had this opportunity to speak with fellow candidates and students tonight. Just to sum up, I feel like a broken record because all I have been talking about is COVID safety, COVID safety, COVID safety. But I think it's absolutely essential for the upcoming year because it's not just about us, it's about the greater Montreal community. An outbreak at McGill isn't just an outbreak at McGill, it's an outbreak in the city and the surrounding areas. I believe my platform and my experience both speak for themselves. I'm ready for this job. I'm very ready, and I believe that students need an experienced leader who is willing to advocate for what we need. And please feel free to reach out with any questions or check out my platform on Facebook. I will be happy to chat about anything.
All right, thank you to both of the VP University Affairs candidates. With that, we're going to move on to VP Intern. All right, so Sarah should now be spotlighted for all of you who's running for VP Internal. We're going to start with 1 minute opening statement, Sarah.
All right, ladies, gentlemen, and all those in between, je suis très excitée d'être ici ce soir pour partager mes idées sur le portefeuille de la vice-présidence interne. I'm currently a U1 student studying English literature, but through my extensive involvement and connections on campus, I have garnered a lot of experience in student leadership, mostly through IRSAM, and I'm excited to share all my ideas with you tonight. My platform relies heavily on rebranding SMU as a place of inclusivity and transparency through the increased activity on our social media platforms, and in addition to a link tree in our bio for the ease of access of information. In addition, as a recent first year, I vividly remember the issues that come with trying to adapt to a new school in a new place. So in this vein, I would push for creation of a council with first year representatives of all faculties and install bi-weekly meetings to hear out all the first year's concerns in real time. Thus, my platform relies strongly on feedback and openness in order to incorporate change to the SMU brand, breaking down the wall between the student society and the student body. Thank you.
I was muted. All right, so thank you, Sarah. We're going to move on to the executive questions, and I think Pooja is going to ask these questions.
Right. So the executive team, including VP Finance and VP Social Student Life, submitted these questions. So the first question is, since readership of listservs has traditionally been relatively low, how would you make them more engaging? You have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, so actually I discussed this a little bit with the Tribune, and I do think it's because it's really hard to access the listservs and they're not easily accessible. So therefore, like I mentioned in my opening speech, the creation of a link tree that we can link into our bio that has the listservs easily accessible to everyone through 2 clicks, I think is a really great way to increase readership. Also, I think different formatting. The formatting of listservs can be quite daunting, kind of bulky. Therefore, increase of more bullet points and just main ideas, and that you can thereafter link to a bigger platform that those who are interested in can read is kind of the best way to go about this, because no one wants to be bungled down by a bunch of information. So through the link trees and a more a different format of the listservs, I think that would really increase readership.
Right. So the next question. This year, many of the events traditionally organized by the VP internal and staff could not happen due to COVID. With the recent announcement from McGill that campus will be transitioning back into in-person activities, there is an underlying assumption that SMU will begin hosting in-person events such as Faculty Olympics again next year. Given the fact that you have not had the opportunity to participate in any of these SMU events, how do you plan on organizing them while still maintaining the safety of all event participants?
Yeah, so although I haven't had the chance to participate in any of them, I have had a lot of experience in event planning. I currently sit on the Secretariat for SUNS, which is the Modern United Nations organization for high school students that McGill organizes. And through that, I have had a lot of experience in planning events and reaching out to people and making sure that they're safe. So I think the first thing to do, obviously, is to create different timelines for the events coming up that include all kinds of different scenarios, whether we start in person and then go back to being online if there's a major outbreak. Also, in my platform, I've outlined how I want to start with pod-style events and not go fully back into in-person. So even though we are going back in person, the events will not look like how they did in 2019. They're going to be a lot smaller. They're going to be a lot more dispersed to make sure that there is no spread of COVID through big parties. So that's kind of how I'm envisioning the return to events.
All right, thank you, Sarah. So we're going to now go to the SMUnian questions.
Hi. So the question we have for this role is, the Vice President internal position has experienced a lot of instability over the past several years, which has resulted in less training and guidance for portfolio staff, while requiring additional labor on their part. What is your plan to stabilize the portfolio, and how will you work with staff who've been covering portions of the portfolio, typically covered by the executive?
Yeah, so I'm coming into this position in a very unstable place. I had to meet with execs that didn't really have much internal experience because they had to take on work that they had not signed up for. So I think from the get-go, if getting into this position, it's going to be talking to people full-time staff that work there and seeing from their experiences what has gone right and what has gone wrong. And I think a lot of my work next year is going to be rebuilding the portfolio pretty much from the bottom. And one of my plans is really to create a kind of a document in which everything is outlined and how to train other people. One of my platforms is to create, I'm in charge of the French affairs, the Francophone affairs, so really training more of those people to make sure that the Francophone affairs are being properly represented, because they haven't been because of what has been going on with this exec position. So I think it's going to be a lot of communication to make sure that the position becomes a lot stronger through the people that work under the VP internal.
All right, thank you. So now we're going to move I'm going to move us back in the slide, and we are going to go to the online questions. So yep, these questions all came from the form. So I'm going to start with your first question. You'll have 1 minute to respond. A large part of your portfolio would be to coordinate events and programming. How do you intend to increase the accessibility of SMU's events, and overall, what does accessibility mean to you?
Right, so the VP internal works a lot with SPIN, so definitely working with them in tandem and making sure that the events that we are creating are what students want. Therefore, like I talked about in the communications portfolio, it would be a lot of interacting with students and making sure that, you know, what they want is what they're receiving. So through like, oh, like we're planning this event, what theme would you like it to be? To make sure that everyone is getting the kind of experience that they want. Also, especially in the fall semester, making sure that there are online alternatives that are just as much paid attention to as in-person events, to make sure that those who have like health issues and don't feel comfortable going to in-person events are being properly represented. In addition, I do want to give more space to the alternative frosh that SMU organizes by making sure that they have as great as an experience as those that are led by faculties.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to move on to the second question. Do you think your lack of previous experience in student government, especially within SMU, could pose difficulties for you over the next year? How do you intend to differentiate yourself from past VP internals who have already accomplished much of what you've outlined in your platform?
Right, so I think, and this, I know Eric covered a little bit when he was asked a similar question. I don't think that my lack of experience makes me a less qualified candidate. I think with SMU, no one is truly ready, no matter how much experience you have, you're being thrown into the lion's den, and there's a reason we have so much training. Are you gonna start the timer? Just so I know how much time I have.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'll, do you want 30 seconds? Okay, yeah. So once it hits 30, I'm so sorry. It's the first time.
Yeah, so as I was saying, no, I don't think that my lack of leadership has anything to do with it, because I do have other leadership experience that transfers quite well into this position. And talking about, yes, my platform is more about like building upon what's already been done and making sure that this is still the priority of the VP internal, and making sure that all student rights are being properly represented, because although this has been done, it hasn't been done well, and I just want to make sure that that idea is still being presented.
All right, thank you, and sorry for that again. Okay, I'm going to move on to the last question. Do you believe that VIP culture at SMU events is an issue, and how do you plan to address this?
VIP events?
Do you believe that VIP culture at SMU events is an issue? And if so, how do you plan to address this?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm really trying, with the events that I have planned, I'm trying to change what events mean. I do believe that like my platform is really focused on inclusivity. As you know, like a first year student, like I definitely agree that like this is an issue, and that sometimes you can't always like be a part of these activities and you feel left out. So I definitely agree that these are going to be kind of events that I'm planning that really like increase accessibility. I think that's super important, and student life is really about all students and should not be focused on a certain kind of student. And that's why also I'm really pushing for like non-alcoholic events and events where drinking culture isn't as strong, because although that is a huge part of McGill, that is an inclusivity issue, and it's something that I'm really trying to push for through, you know, the SMU frosh and through events that don't focus so much on drinking culture.
All right, thank you. So we're going to move on to audience questions now. So Pooja, if you want to call people's names out.
Okay, first hand I saw was Sanchi.
Hi, am I unmuted now?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Hi, Sarah. I was the last postdoc position a couple years ago. I do have two questions, but since someone else has hand up, I'll just ask one of them. I know in your platform you talked about how you want to give SMU Frosh the same treatment as faculty Froshes. Now, with it, you have to keep in mind that faculty Froshes have a team of 6 to 12 people, depending on the faculty they're recruited from, and they're recruited around this time, and they spend all summer working on Frosh. So do you think that the VP internal alone, with perhaps the internal logistics coordinator, if they're hired earlier than usual, would be able to create an equivalent Frosh experience that is monetarily feasible? Keep in mind that SMU events under the VP internal's portfolio, as compared to other portfolios, are run completely on ticket sales. You don't touch funds, you don't touch operational budgets, it's run completely on the tickets you sell. And if these events go well, do you think that drawing people away from faculty Froshes would strain those relationships even more than they already are?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And definitely, so I think that with the idea of this strained relationship, I think because we're offering a Frosh that is very, very different, it's going to attract different kinds of people. And I think what it's going to do is get people that just don't sign up to Frosh in the first place to go to find a place where they feel more safe. So getting, you know, the either the underage students who don't really feel like getting into drinking culture, or those that just don't feel comfortable. So I think it's a completely different demographic. And in addition, yes, of course, during the summer, like I would have to be working overtime. I think also the creation of perhaps a Frosh kind of like council within the VP portfolio could be a great way to make sure that this is addressed properly, and to make sure that the students that are attending this Frosh are having as great of an experience as possible.
Okay, the next hand I saw was Valerie.
Hi, I was wondering how you were gonna fulfill the mandate that you have to foster relationships with faculty associations and departmental associations. It has been a mandate that was kind of put aside by other VP internals, and is that your intention? And if not, how are you gonna fulfill the brief?
Yeah, for sure. So that's definitely a huge part of my platform, because there is, I feel like, a big divide between faculties, clearly because, you know, we just study different things, and there are different student organizations. So I think kind of what I've outlined in the first year affairs, with the creation of a first year council of all the different first year representatives of different faculties, is going to be a great step in that direction, to make sure that all faculties are being not only properly represented, but also that they can share ideas and build off of each other to create better experiences for all faculties at the same time. And I think that the communication between that first year council will help in future leaders of student governments in specific faculties. And I think it's going to be a great stepping stone to make sure that all faculties are being properly represented, but also communicating between each other.
All right, thank you very much, Sarah. Unfortunately, for the sake of time, we're not going to take any more questions now, but again, you can either email us, or you can find Sarah's information on the event in the document if you want to ask your questions. And, you know, we'll have a break coming up in a second if it's still fresh in your mind. With that, Sarah, we're going to move on to closing statements.
Right. So, merci pour vos questions et votre temps. I'm honored to be given the opportunity to run for this position and to share my ideas towards the creation of a more inclusive campus. Through overcoming my own struggles and hardships with acceptance and identity, coming to a new place is probably one of the most daunting experiences, and I will strive to create a more inclusive space to ease the transition, specifically of first-year students. Of course, it is impossible for me to do this all by myself, and thus my platform relies heavily upon the creation of increased communication with the rest of the student body to accurately represent them, as thus is the primary goal of SMU. Although McGill is striving for an in-person semester in the fall, I realize that this might not be accessible to everyone, and want to ensure that all students are enjoying everything student life has to offer. I hope that despite my youth, my passion and willingness to learn through the intensive training in the summer has convinced you that I am a good candidate for this position. Through inclusive events, a bigger presence for French life, and an exponential increase in communications, I hope to change SMU's image as a place for students. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you, Sarah. So with that, oh yeah. All right, we're gonna move into an intermission for we do 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
5 minutes, we'll say.
5 minutes. We'll come back at 5:30.
Yeah. So see you all.
Sorry, not 5:30, 7:30. I'm in Alberta. My bad.
All right, I think we're ready to jump back into it. So next up, we have the candidate for VP External. So Sasha, if you're here, we'll unmute you. Awesome. Okay, so we'll start with a 1-minute opening statement.
Thank you. Dearest attendees, my name is Sasha, and today I am honored to be before you as candidate for VP External of SMU. Je m'appelle Sacha, et aujourd'hui je suis honoré d'être devant vous en tant que candidat pour la vice-présidence externe de l'AEUM. I am a U2 student double majoring in political science and international development. Originally from Paris, I moved to Montreal a little over a year and a half ago, and I got used to the Quebec accent a little over a year ago. I have always strived to be engaged in my community in political affairs, advocacy, and fundraising for nonprofits through various community organizations in France and Canada. Today, I am running for VP External to do exactly that. While easing the transition back to in-person learning and activities, I will continue the projects taken by SMU, but also undertake new initiatives to ameliorate the student body's life, representation, and community engagement. I promise to add the external portfolio to SMU's 5-year plan to better represent student activism beyond the confines of our university. Furthermore, I want to work with student services to become more accessible and more publicized. Finally, I would like to continue community engagement work by raising awareness on low-income and homeless communities, creating more accessible courses on indigenous peoples, and pursuing SMU's affordable housing plan. I thank you for your time and attention.
All right, great. So now we'll have 2 questions from the current executive, which I will be asking. All right, so first, SMU hasn't been part of a student federation at the provincial level for over 5 years and has historically had disillusioning encounters with the Quebec Student Union. What makes you confident that you can successfully have SMU join the QSU in 1 year and that this is the best decision for SMU? You have 1 minute to respond.
Thank you for your question. And I've actually had a pretty lengthy conversation with AO, the incumbent, about this. And what you have to know about the QSU is that the QSU is actually a relatively new organization, and its predecessor is an organization that SMU was in fact a part of. The reason that SMU did not join the QSU is because in the past, the QSU, in SMU's opinion, has diverged too much from SMU's opinion or just not having tangible enough mobilization. However, after looking at their most recent mobilization, whether it was last year with all the social justice protests, as well as what they've done for climate justice and for Bill 21, I really do believe that it will be a great web and platform for SMU and the students of SMU to better advocate for their ideas and to be better represented beyond the confines of McGill and throughout Montreal and Quebec as a whole. Thank you.
So the next question. The VP External assists grassroots student groups in political campaigns that are affiliated with the SMU. One of the main responsibilities of the VP External is to assist with the Society's political campaigns, some of which you may not personally support. If there is ever conflict, what will you do to ensure that your personal political commitments do not hinder the fulfillment of SMU's political commitments?
This is a really important question because obviously I will be biased and I will have my own opinions regarding certain political campaigns. However, I do believe that an elected official must remain unbiased and support every student. That means that by taking the position of VP External, if elected, I have to represent every single student and all of their beliefs. One of the main parts of my platform is to represent every student with different ideas, no matter what they are. And that is why I would commit to remaining unbiased, even when assisting and working with grassroots student groups that I do not personally agree with. On a side note, I do personally believe that after a lot of research, I have similar views to a lot of student groups and political campaigns on campus and will be able to assist them reach the best of their potential. Thank you.
All right, great. So our next question comes from the SMUian.
Hi. How do you intend to prioritize your portfolio's campaign focuses in your staff's time, especially regarding campaigns that are already in the works?
Thank you for your question, and I do truly believe that the strength of the external portfolio, and that is something that I've learned throughout my various conversations with the incumbent, is the strength and the ties of the staff. It's a really well-built staff that will be able to divide and conquer. And that's why I believe that the portfolio, one of its main prongs is to work on political affairs and campaigns on campus. And this is why I would want to keep prioritizing exactly that and keep prioritizing the campaigns that are already in the works and give the platform for new campaigns to come out and also come into the works. Because once again, every student must be properly represented, no matter how much work that involves on our side. Thank you.
Great. So now we're going to move on to questions submitted to us from the online form. So first up, much of the external affairs portfolio requires collaboration with the Milton Park community to create a more harmonious relationship between SMU and the community. What experience do you have working with this group?
The Milton Park, the community in Milton Park is truly one that that affects the student life a lot, because the majority of students are based in this community and in the Milton Park area. I personally live in the Milton Park area, and I've had to deal with landlords just as well as business owners. And I really think that to better the relations with the Milton Park, with the community, the best way is to just simply tighten the relations between the student body and the community. That starts by not only working with grassroots initiatives in the Milton Park community, such as Meals for Milton Park or Yellow Door, to make more services accessible to students and to allow students to better volunteer and take part in the community. But I also think that a huge part of that is working with local businesses and landlords and any other relevant staff or people to just increase the communication between the student body and the community. I know there's 20 seconds left on the timer, but I think it was started a little bit late.
All good. Okay, so our next question. You heavily mentioned increasing representation of French in SMU, including translating documents. However, the Francisization plans, which partly included the diversion of new funds to pay for such translation, failed. How do you plan to address this?
This is a question that's come up a lot, and Francophone affairs as a whole has come up a lot throughout this debate. And I honestly, my views are truly in line with a lot of the previous statements. First of all, I believe that by putting a spotlight and advocating for French students is right, more people will realize the importance of Francophone affairs within SMU and within McGill University, which will give a better shot at creating such initiatives. The first thing I'd like to personally do as a part of my portfolio if I'm elected for Francophone affairs is to create work-centric French programs to facilitate the learning of French for non-French speaking students to better to be able to have internships or jobs in Montreal and Quebec, which is currently a true obstacle for them. I think that is going to start to put a spotlight on the need for French and therefore create a platform to create more opportunities, such as the hiring of translators, such as the translation of all documents and the translation of websites. Thank you.
All right. And our last question from the forum. All executives are currently mandated to give reports to the Legislative Council and General Assemblies. How do you intend to create increased transparency and accountability from this when it is already the norm?
Accountability and transparency is obviously the norm, and it's something that is super important within McGill and SMU because it really relates to equity. When I've had the chance to meet with AO, so the incumbent, he actually had the opportunity and very kindly took the time to show to me what one of these reports looks like to the General Assembly. In terms of increasing accessibility and transparency, I first think that we need to spotlight these reports and make them more accessible and more easily findable through possibly a link tree. But I also believe that there should be more summaries of the legislation that is passed, as well as the work that is being done within each portfolio to just better present to students what is being done, as well as the publication of infographics on social media to explain to students in a brief and outlined way what is being done for them and what is being done for the student body and student engagement.
All right, great. So now we're going to move on to questions from the audience. So if you raise your hand, I will call on you. So the first person I saw is Noah.
Hey, thank you for your time. I guess my question is about your advocacy priorities. You mentioned that you wanted to advocate for things that were supported by all students and represent all students. You know, the examples you gave was Law 21. My question for this is that such things like Law 21 are supported, unfortunately, by many students. There are a lot of advocacy points that a lot of students might not necessarily agree with. How can you ensure that your advocacy will support the most marginalized students, even when it's not universally accepted by the student body? And how will you act as a representative in those cases?
Yeah, thank you for your question. And actually, you point out something really important that's linked to a fine line that I think the VP External has to navigate, because obviously the VP External is in charge of student engagement and advocacy. I personally believe that SMU has taken very strong stances on things such as Bill 21 in the past, and that we must not diverge from said stances, especially when it comes to things such as human rights. So I truly believe that while maintaining these stances, we must prioritize equity, and therefore also be in communication, in constant communication with all student groups on campus to see what their beliefs are, what their priorities are, how we can help them advocate for their beliefs and representation, all the while staying equitable and representing human rights, which, in my opinion, is something that Bill 21 goes against.
Okay, great. So the next person I saw was Matthew.
Hi, yeah. In your answer about working with the Milton Park community, you mentioned working with grassroots organizations, and I was wondering what your experience with grassroots organizing is, and what qualifies you to work with grassroots political and community groups.
Thank you for your question, and honestly, to be entirely honest with you, I haven't had much since I've moved to Canada. However, I have had a decent amount of experience working with grassroots or with different grassroots initiatives and organizations back when I lived in France. So unfortunately, that dates back to slightly over a year and a half ago. But I have worked with local initiatives for food drives, as much as fundraising for different communities. And I believe that the one thing I took away from it is mostly the need for advocacy and spotlighting these organizations, which is why in my platform I've outlined the need to, when working with grassroots organizations, using the SMU platform to talk about them to students. Something similar to a grassroots organization that I've worked with personally since moving to Canada is Rise to Thrive, which is an organization focused on mental health and on taking initiative. I do believe that this will give me great experience when working with student services and other services in the Milton Park community.
All right. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for audience questions. So we will now be moving on to closing statements.
Thank you. I'd like to thank all of you for your questions and your attention during this time. I'd also like to take a minute to thank Pooja and Ben for organizing not only this event, but the entire election process. I commend their efforts, and I sincerely hope that everyone else does as well. I'd also like to thank the Tribune and the Bull and Bear for taking the time to meet with all the candidates and myself. And finally, I'd like to thank all the people who have helped me with all of with the campaign process, no matter the outcome of these elections. Having the opportunity to run for such a position in the hopes of taking a larger part in student life, advocacy, representation, and community engagement is truly a privilege that I didn't even know I'd have when I moved to McGill. However, there are still many issues that need to be looked at when looking at the student body and the quality of student life and the advocacy that students get beyond the confines of McGill. And that is why I am presenting myself as VP External. I thank all of you for your time, and I look forward to hearing from you if you have any questions. Thank you.
All right, great. So now we'll be moving on to the presidential debate. Just to let everyone know, due to unforeseen circumstances, one of the candidates who's running for president, Mark Morrison, is not able to make it here tonight. So it'll just be candidate Darianani and candidate Reed debating tonight. Start with opening statements, and whichever of you wants to go first, feel free.
I'm happy to go first. Okay. Hi, folks. I'm Darshan Darianani, and I use he, him pronouns. Thank you for coming out. It's a pleasure to meet with you virtually. Over the past 4 years, it has been an absolute privilege to represent you at the University Senate, the SMU Legislative Council, as well as the Arts Undergraduate Society. I've also had the opportunity to serve as an executive for 5 different student clubs and 12 committees. I put forward my candidacy because I genuinely believe that the SMU is capable of mobilizing and creating change on this campus. We at the SMU have a responsibility and a shared goal to give you one hell of a university experience. I plan to do this by supporting the ongoing work of the reopening of the GERDS and the university building, as well as to offer a different variety of services, including a tax and financial clinic, a MySMU app, as well as a variety of events. And more importantly, I'd like to support the roles of the equity portfolio and the services, expand the anti-violence and anti-oppression, as well as hold the university accountable for its advocacy initiatives. Thank you.
Good, I suppose I shall go next. Thank you so much, everybody. My name is Jake Reed. My pronouns are they and he. I'm a materials engineering student from Malaysia and the US, and I'm running to be your next SMU president. My experience in the last 3 years at McGill has included serving as a EUS representative to SMU, being on the EUS Board of Governors, working with Montreal students for COVID-19 response and relief, and numerous other initiatives, clubs, and various projects. I'm running for SMU because I want to foster an organization that has your back on the important issues that are facing each of our students, whether they be ones coming from the pandemic, the principal, or the premier. My objectives going into next year are going to be about ensuring a safe and accessible reopening for all students, especially our at-risk and international ones, improving SMU's structural support for advocacy groups and improving its own advocacy infrastructure, and expanding legal protection for all interested SMU members. I really look forward to answering your questions going into this, and if you have any more, feel free to DM me after the debate. Thanks so much, everyone.
All right, great. So now we'll be moving on to a question from the current executive. So Jamark, if you're here.
Yeah, here. So yeah, I have one question for both of you together, so you can both answer that, and then I have a specific question for each of your platforms. So we'll start with a general question, and whoever wants to go first can go first. As president, you'll have the following responsibilities amongst others. So 1, being a SMU executive, 2, being a SMU director, and 3, being a member of the McGill Board of Governors. So you'll often be placed in a position where these positions have competing interests. How would you balance these competing interests?
Whoever wants to answer first.
Okay. I think being president is a role that fundamentally involves balance. It's a role that's charged with managing the day-to-day initiatives of SMU, but it is also one that is necessarily involved in the sort of political work that it does, being as it is sort of meant to be an outward-facing arm of the SSMU. And for that reason, I think maintaining those kinds of relationships now is a huge part of the role and something that requires a steady hand and a correct temperament. But ultimately, I want to say that of all these 3, being a member of the McGill Board of Governors certainly doesn't interact in the same way as being a SMU director or being a SMU executive do. Fundamentally, the purpose of the SMU is to serve students and put their interests first. So where possible, I'm always going to prioritize what ultimately feels like it's going to be responsive to the needs of our most marginalized and vulnerable students, while keeping in mind the recommendations and, of course, the mandate of the Board of Directors and our governance manager in order to ensure our legal and fiscal sustainability.
Thank you for your question, Jamark, and thank you for the amazing work that you do. I think you strike a very good balance in maintaining your responsibility and has definitely served as an inspiration for me to follow in your footsteps. So for me, I think the answer lies in the fact that we are a union of 24,000 students. We're a union that continues to advocate for the rights and interests of students. And whether a SMU executive, a director, or a member of the McGill Board board of governors, we continue to have the same values, and those values are to ensure that we have a safe and equitable campus, an accessible and inclusive learning style, and the maintenance of a quality of education. These goals are in line with McGill's mission as well as the SMU mission. I think in the MOA that we signed with McGill, we continue to reassure McGill that we will continue to work in the interest of our students. And what is more than crucial is to maintain the trust that we have with students and the administration by fostering these working relationships and enhancing them. Thank you.
All right, Jamark, if you want to ask your next question, please.
Thanks. So I'll start maybe with Darshan since you went second. So in your platform, you mentioned that you'll enhance the SMU member offerings, and so you list things like the SMU mobile app. But I noticed that everything else that you listed, the package depot, tax clinic, players theater renovation, these are all kind of in the 5-year plan that was already approved at the Legislative Council. So I guess I was asking, is there anything that you're doing different in regards to these? Or are you just going to continue kind of the work that's in the 5-year plan right now?
Thank you for your question. Once again, thank you for the amazing work that you put in for the master plan. I think fundamentally, the role of the president involves shaping the vision of the society and uplifting and empowering the work that various executive, current, past, as well as the permanent and part-time staff continue to put into the work. My goals in enhancing the student experience and offering better services is a matter of priority. I think given the 3 years of university centers closure, as well as the 1-year pandemic, it is the top priority on my list. And I think the goal really is just to make sure that I will be a support hand in the long-term planning of the society. Like everyone else, I'm looking forward to the opening of GERDS 3501 to make it a student hub, to make it a place where we can continue to spend time, and to ensure that the services will be student-centric and a student-centered place. I also would like to acknowledge the work of the GERDS Bar Manager and the ongoing work that has been happening. Thank you.
All right, great. And Jamark, if you have your last question.
Thanks. Yeah, so this one's for Jake. So this is a specific question regarding your campaign point on getting support from alumni SMU executives to restore institutional knowledge. My question is, how do you plan to institute this in practice? SMU doesn't really have an in-depth archive of past SMU executives, so I imagine it'll be difficult to get hold of most alumni.
As I couldn't unmute myself. That's a great question. And when I put that in my platform point, the focus was chiefly about the most recent SMU executives because they have the most recent experience and therefore are going to be able to fill in the institutional gaps, the institutional memory gaps that have formed during the pandemic. It's worth noting that the VP Student Life portfolio has been largely inactive this year with respect to being largely no longer in person. So although Mahina has done some excellent work, certainly the portfolio has looked very different. To say nothing of the fact that the VP internal portfolio certainly hasn't literally had a VP internal for a year. Looking back, so my priority for getting those old SMU executives on board is chiefly with the old VP Student Life and the old VP internal. Now, I can already say I actually am pleased to have the confirmation of Sanchi Bala, the old VP internal, who's going to enable us to be able to fill in the institutional memory gap and be able to wind up in a place better than before. And I guess I'm running out of time, but that would be instituted largely through maintaining their presence on sort of committees to ensure not too much time commitment for them, but still getting the knowledge.
Thank you, Jake. So next up, we have a question from the SMUians.
Hi, folks. The question I have for the two of you is, what is your understanding of collective bargaining, and how do you intend to work with SMU management to carry on collective bargaining with SMUians starting in June?
I can field that one first. Collective bargaining isn't something that I have direct experience with, as I haven't been a member of either, an upper management component of a nonprofit before, nor a executive member of a union. That being said, I believe going into it, a guiding principle for me is going to be the fact that the SMUian is ultimately largely composed of students or other people whose primary, service or the primary purpose of their job is to serve SMU and make our students' lives better. And so fundamentally, as an institution that's based around providing for our students and offering them services, I don't want to approach that in the way a management position might traditionally approach a situation with a union, right? I'm not going to approach that from the standpoint of trying to give as little ground as possible. And being as, my role is going to be largely about, ensuring that, yes, management is maintained. We have, legal and fiscal sustainability. Obviously, that's in the interest of union members as well. And I want to be able to balance those two things. Thank you.
Hi, Belle. Thank you so much for your question and thank you for being here today. I think my experience lies in the fact that I have worked together with solidarity movements across campus, whether it is the climate strike in 2019, where we garnered over 1,000 people and for the first ever sort of AUS General Assembly, as well as to work as a student. I think ultimately as students, we're looking for the same thing: job stability, no harassment, no stress in the workplace, fair pay. I think working overtime often doesn't receive the same acknowledgement. The amount of student labor that goes unpaid and SMU is just inadmissible, So I think ultimately that I intend to work on a basis of compromise, a principle of trust, a principle of respect, and an acknowledgement of all the efforts. I think starting in June, I hope to see that we can make change and we can make it happen, that the SMU union will actually come to term with its first agreement, which I believe is still under negotiations. Thank you.
Thank you, Belle. So now we're going to move on to questions that were submitted to us on the online form. So first we have a general question for both candidates.
Sorry, Preeti, I think we missed the candidates discussion.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That is completely my bad. Yeah, let's go back to the candidates discussion then. Jake, or actually Darshan, if you'd like to ask Jake your question first. Jake, you'll have 1 minute to respond. Darshan, you'll have 30 seconds to rebuttal.
Sure. Are they on the slides? Just because I sent them prior.
We did not put those on the slides, no.
Okay. Just need to pull it up. Sorry. Sorry, I'm just having a Wi-Fi issue.
That's right.
Here. So a large part of the SMU president's responsibility is to build on the work and long-term planning of previous executives and staff. Over the last 3 years, SMU presidents have worked hard to prepare long-term goals and planning for at least the next 5 years in the form of the recently approved master plan. The incoming president will have a lot to do in terms of implementing this plan. So what role does it play in your plans and priorities?
That's an excellent question, Darshan. Thank you. In large part, I think it fundamentally, the infrastructural changes recommended by Jamark are excellent, and I hope to work them in, especially in regards to expanding our roles with respect to advocacy. I think being able to plan on a long-term basis heavily plays into the advocacy portfolio, and I hope to work closely with the VP External to implement specific changes such as the expansion of an external affairs and advocacy database, expansion of roles in the portfolio that has to do with advocacy, both in the external portfolio and the president's outward-facing portfolio, as well as having a full-time researcher position for those things. And with the eye towards the 5-year plan, that's going to enable us to be able to have a functional relationship with members of parliament, with members of labor unions, with even other student unions in Quebec. And through that, we'll be able to maintain these things on a year-on-year basis. And so for me, the 5-year plan looks like us getting things done on behalf of students in the long term on an advocacy.
Darshan, you have 30 seconds to rebuttal.
Right. Thank you. I think I disagree a little bit. I think for me, the plan has outlined some of our priorities. And I think for me, some of the key priorities is actually bringing back student experience. As mentioned in my platform, I think given that there's been Zoom fatigue, there's been construction, library closures and stuff, we often lack
we currently lack the infrastructure to continue to bring back life. So I think for me, that's priority over advocacy with external bodies.
Pooja, shall I deliver mine now?
Yes, sorry. I was
No worries. Yeah, so thank you in advance for your response and for taking this question. As Jamark said, a lot of your platform consists of measures that are already in place or in the works for next year, not just because of the 5-year plan, but this includes the reopening and renovation of Gertz Bar, expansions and reopening of the University Center, having equity commissioners and anti-violence commissioners or coordinators specialize in conflict resolution, adding Indigenous Affairs, Equity, and Francophone Affairs counselors to the Legislative Council. We actually already have a Francophone Affairs counselor this year. Improving accountability structures to the board, mentorship programs and student services, hiring French translation services are all things that have been mandated or are already in the work for next year. And several people who are involved in work in those efforts have taken to social media in recent days or even DM'd me personally to express their frustration or hurt that your platform is promising things that they have already spent hundreds of hours working to provide for students. If elected, how do you plan to address this with those students in particular, ensure that those students get recognition for their work and build positive relationships with them, being as they'll be your colleagues from then on?
Thank you, Jake. That's a great question. My vision for SMU is to ensure support for all members of the society to maintain these positive relationships. I personally reached out to the individuals involved, and I've acknowledged the tremendous labor that past and current executives have put through my consultation. I believe that what I witness is this is what we need, and that's why I put it key in my platform. In no way am I trying to take credit of the work of these hardworking individuals and these individuals who possess the expertise. In fact, I'm asking for their trust and support to continue to provide the long-term support that the society needs. And if I may, I'd like to just correct you that actually we do not have a French translator. We do not have a Francophone Affairs Commissioner and Legislative Council. Unfortunately, these policies failed in the CGRC review that I witnessed for hours in the last year. So it's just a shame that Francophone students don't continue to be represented. It's just a shame that we have things in plan and paper, but they're not actionable.
Take you 30 seconds to respond.
Yes, I fully, agree that in certain cases there's deadlock or a lack of institutional support for their knowledge. But unfortunately, I don't personally see components of your platform with respect to like Gertz Bar reopening, for instance, that specifically cater to those needs. I do believe that there need to be measures, and that's why I've implemented plans like ensuring that we have close contact with the old SMU executives to make sure that those people have the institutional knowledge to support them. As well as, of course, actually, maintaining the pandemic as a presence that we have to account for moving into that. I think it's incredibly important that any president's platform open student life.
All right. So now we'll move on to online questions that were submitted to us from the forum. So first up, and whoever wants to answer first, feel free. How will you defend freedom of expression on campus?
I can go ahead. Freedom of expression, very key, very important in an academic institution. Unfortunately, McGill doesn't value it. McGill looks at it as more of an issue where there's a dichotomy between the two. I think of it differently. I think the two can work very coherently. I think there have been significant cases in the past year, especially notably the University of Ottawa scenario where certain words were just uttered in class without any repercussions. And sad to say, 3 McGill professors actually signed the statement supporting the fact that these words can't be used in the classroom. Academic freedom is not just a fundamental principle for academics to value, but it also continues to undermine the safety of students. On Senate, I have had the opportunity to question the academic provost, Christopher Manfredi, as well as Madam Suzanne Fortier on these policies. We have continued to work with the UA portfolio and Senate caucus to ensure that the university values academic freedom as well as safety and inclusivity of students.
Thank you. Jake, feel free to respond.
Yeah, I hesitated to answer that question first because I think it is a difficult thing to position. To me, I think the question of expressing freedom of expression as campus, at least for students, is certainly one that is important to uphold. But the debate right now is one that we're currently facing a situation where the McGill administration, as Darshan rightly said, is taking an incredibly obtuse approach to this situation. And Francois Legault is somebody that we can expect not to take a side of ensuring that we have a safe, equitable, and dignified student learning environment, but one where that sort of like freedom of expression is touted as a cover story for professors who do not practice any kind of consideration if they're teaching sensitive topics or just straight up transphobes. And it's incredibly important to me that I think freedom of expression is important, but I also don't think that our advocacy efforts to advocate for better faculty conduct standards are ones that are a threat to academic, are ones that are a threat to freedom of expression, so much as they are just trying to make this a safe learning environment for all of us. Thank you.
So now I'm going to ask questions that are specific to each of you that were submitted on our form. So first, Jake, you've stated that you plan to institute a hotel quarantine fund for international students with financial need. Assuming that around 10% of international students are eligible and half the cost will be covered, this will cost roughly $600,000 or 25% of the SMU's operating budget. If it is not feasible for the SMU to implement a program of this scale alone, how do you plan to follow through on this promise?
I think that's a great question, and I would say that that there are some assumptions that are being made in that calculation, such as all international students having to do a hotel quarantine. And it is important that we have contingency plans for everything, but I do think it is we can justify that the situation by say September will have altered itself enough that we might not have hotel quarantines for every single student. And it is important that we have are able to recuperate those funds if that plan is sort of put into motion. But ultimately, we will be accounting for something of a smaller scale, but ultimately one that's still able to plan out for the contingency plans. And this is one where its feasibility is something that I have checked with the present VP Finance, and one where I have gotten a generally positive review on the VP Finance candidates here. So I'm confident that we're going to be able to come through for students in that kind of regard. Thank you.
All right. The question that was submitted for Darshan. A lot of your campaign promises are goals that have already been addressed and carried out by current SMU execs through the official rollout, though the official rollout has been delayed due to the ongoing pandemic, for example, the reopening of GERTS. What new ideas will you bring to SMU as president, and how will you ensure transparency on what you hope to accomplish moving forward?
Thank you for that question. Once again, the fact that it has been delayed means that the next new president has the role to continue to carry out these plans. The vision, the implementation, the support that is necessary will come from the presidential portfolio. It is important for us to work wholeheartedly as a team to ensure that we can bring back what has been lost. It's just sad that the past 1 year has put us backward instead of forward in what we can offer our students. Students have continued to pay fees, surpluses continue to exist, and it just hasn't fulfilled the experience that everyone has come for. Specifically for first year students, no frosh or an online frosh, no GERTS bar, no student club experience. In fact, it was very difficult to even reach out to them in the first place, has basically meant that I have to continue as a president to fulfill these promises that we have passed through the master plan, as well as a team as a whole, to ensure the well-being of our services and our organization.
All right, thank you both. So now we'll be moving on to questions from our audience. And I'm going to try and call on people who haven't had a chance to speak yet. So first up, Joe Roy, if you would like to ask a question.
Thanks, Pooja. Yes, I have a question for both of the candidates. As president, you're in a position to do much advocacy work from your seats within the McGill administration. Therefore, how would you, in this role, advance the implementation of the TRC calls to action at McGill?
So with respect to advocacy in the president's political role, I do think 50% of the president's role at least is one that depends on advocacy and that on advocacy and political work. And I think it's incredibly important for me. A major priority is going to be showing resolve as an executive, particularly with the VP University Affairs. If the president appears as being more conciliatory towards the McGill administration, yeah, there is definitely something to be said for the good cop, bad cop strategy, but also the McGill administration will act towards the president in a way to literally take advantage of SMU and prevent them from getting their advocacy goals done. So that's one major priority for me. I also think as a whole, we need to show resolve as an institution when it comes to McGill's threats to us, specifically with the MOA. McGill has sent us 4 threats of default in the last year. Every year previous to that, they sent us cumulatively 1. They use it as a scare tactic because they think it works. And that's an incredibly important component of advocating for us that. So overall, resolve and consolidation of our political views and our political work is going to be an incredibly important priority for me going into the role. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I really appreciate this question. I think fundamentally, it is not just an acknowledgement, but it is a lot of performativity that exists not only on SMU, but on McGill when we acknowledge that we are settlers here on Ganikahaga. I'd like to talk personally about my experiences as someone who comes from a community that lost our homeland during the partition of India in 1947. Nonetheless, that doesn't excuse me from the fact that I'm a settler here in Canada as well. As an immigrant here, we have to continue to uphold our values and to put the First Nations forward. And I'd like to give 2 examples for how I've done this. One is in the past summer, I organized an Imagining Symposium where we continue to promote land-based learnings. We continue to promote the We Will Walk Together event to picture the Orange Shirt Day, which happened last October. I think these initiatives continue to empower our student union. Through the Bacon Committee on naming our buildings of 3501 and the University Center, we continue to uphold our promises to Indigenous students and our solidarity with them in this.
All right. The next person I saw was Nathan Mendel.
Hi, my question is a bit of a 2-parter. First of all, Darshan, as someone who works with the Governing Documents Researcher and also sits on the Comprehensive Governance Review Committee, I noticed that many of the ideas that you include concerning increasing representation, accessibility, and transparency of SMU governing bodies, such as adding seats onto Legislative Council, are already in development by the Governing Documents Researcher and the CGRC. Do you have any other plans that are not already currently being developed? And then more largely for both candidates, I just want to know what you believe the role of consultation within the society is and how will you prioritize it?
Sure, given the first question was addressed to me, I can take that first. I'm so glad to hear that these things are happening with the CGRC and the governance manager portfolio. In fact, I've had multiple meetings with Nicole. She's lovely, she's great. And I think that it is key that we continue to uphold these promises. The fact that our constitution failed once again is just a shame to the Francophone Committee where we basically couldn't even put up a constitution that is in French. I think that's the bare minimum that we can do. At the highest board at the highest body of the organization, the SMU Board of Directors, international voices are continued to be neglected. And here's where I'll answer the second part of your question. Consultation with international students is lacking. There isn't any. When the SMU Board of Directors has only 1 seat for international students to represent over 12,000 students, we see failure. We see the lack of responsibility, this lack of due diligence and due process. I think that the fact that these things are happening is great, but I don't see enough of it yet, which is why my vision is to continue to reinforce these positions and these seats on our legislative bodies, our university committees and such. Thank you.
I suppose I'll take the question about consultation now. I think consultation is an incredibly important part, especially of fulfilling just the basic duties of being president. This is a role that is, it has pretty tremendous shoes to fill. And I don't think there's any student on this campus that has 100% of the experience necessary to understand every issue. I intend to, heavily lean on my fellow executives, as well as on, commissioners, in the fulfillment of that role, as well as just expanding the consultation, capacity at SMU. I think the idea of expanding the international student representation on the board is incredible. The idea of expanding other representatives to the board is great as well. But I also want to expand our capacity to just invite other voices to bring their own ideas to board fundamentally, or to SMU as a whole fundamentally, which is why I ultimately want to make our structures friendlier from a policy writing standpoint for members like advocacy groups, or really anybody who's just looking to write policy and participate in SMU governance. That's an incredibly important contribution of those students to governance, and we need to make it friendlier as a whole. Thank you.
All right. Since we're doing okay on time, I will take 2 more questions from the audience. So, Mary, if you'd like to ask a question.
Yeah, hello, hi. I actually have a question that was from my friend who had to leave early. Nathaniel said he was here earlier in the discussion, but he had to leave. So this question is for Jake. First off, he says, congratulations on your candidacy. You've mentioned that part of your platform includes a makeup frosh for first years. How do you plan on implementing this exactly, especially when it comes to right funding? And will you allocate funds, especially for faculties and their individual frosh committees? I just want to note that Nate is a first year this year himself, so this is something very personal to him, and he would very much appreciate an answer. And I will be recording an answer just so he can get a little clip. Thank you.
No problem. I think ensuring that we have, a makeup frosh to ensure that, students in first year have an experience that makes up for the fact that, their first frosh was spent inside their dorm rooms is incredibly important. That's a role that I think is largely filled by the VP Internal, as well as the IOC and the IFC, as well as, of course, by the actual faculties that conduct these froshes. But SMU does play a pretty important role in maintaining those events. And I intend to, through measures such as improving cutting in the old VP Internal to these sort of consultative components, as well as ensuring that we have a reopening committee that is putting out updates that are consistent and frequent enough that respect the speed at which the situation as a whole is evolving, are ways that we can provide some extra support, and are ways that are specific to my portfolio that would help the large role that the VP Internal has to fill those shoes and to make sure that those kinds of events are available for first years.
Beatrice.
Hello. So my question is actually for Jake. Really great platform, but I just want to talk a bit about legal insurance. So I wanted to point your attention to the existence of the Legal Information Clinic at McGill, which is staffed by law students. It has a student advocacy branch. It has a court accompaniment program. It gives information on rights, especially in landlord-tenant cases, and has helped so many students, but it also allows law students specifically to gain practical experience. Recent Quebec government legislation, which is being implemented, will even allow these law students to give legal advice. So how do you think that the legal insurance plan you're putting forward fits into the existing scheme of services provided by law students in McGill? And how necessarily would you implement this legal insurance plan, as in opt-in, opt-out, or what do you kind of envision? Thank you.
Yeah, I suppose just to answer the very part of your question, first, the implementation of the legal protection plan is something that is provided by Student Care for a fee of $8.30 a semester, which is opt-in, opt-outable. You can choose it if you want to. You will have access to legal consultation and representation in matters that are specific to employment, housing, and student rights. So outside of those issues, and of course, I actually also just wanted to give a shout out to the LIC. I'm glad you threw it out there, because my landlord wouldn't give me a washing machine earlier last week or last semester, and they helped me out a lot, actually. So maintaining them as something that SMU advertises pretty heavily, and is seen as sort of like a forefront, making sure that wherever we have pages that talk about, hey, how can you get legal consultation, we can have the LICM as a resource first, and then we'll say, if you want to go further, here's a way to access legal consultation, or like a more professionalized form of that. But ultimately, I do think putting in those extra measures is going to truly empower students in a way that is kind of unprecedented, by allowing them direct access to actual legal systems. Thank you.
All right. In the name of fairness, if anyone has a Darshan specific question, that would be great. If you could please lower your hand if your question is not specific, just things could be equal. No one is lowering their hands. So I'm going to assume they're for Darshan. Okay, Florence.
So I have a question for each, but they're not the same. So I can still ask that. Yeah. So I guess I'll start with one for Darshan. You mentioned that you wanted to kind of ensure equitable practices, i.e., having anti-oppression trainings. I would just like for you to elaborate more into that because a lot of the faculties have their own equity training. So maybe have you considered the fact that if you add on top of the trainings, that would actually make it a bit too overwhelming or also like overstepping. So I would just kind of have like a better idea on how you plan to implement these anti-oppression trainings. And my question to Jake, you mentioned in the blurb for the candidate information about fighting for inclusive and anti-racist faculty conduct standards. I would just like for you to elaborate onto that because it is not clearly on your platform. So I would just like to have more information on that.
Thank you for the question, Florence. Thank you for bringing this up. Generally, I think that McGill and SMU are not as equitable as it can be. We have the resources at hand, but then we don't have the infrastructure and the institutional knowledge to continue to do so. So personally, I think that for me, this would mean more SMU-specific training. So currently, executives of clubs as well as legislative counselors go through training only once a year. And for clubs, this is only for two executive members, not all of them. So I think promoting anti-racism and anti-oppression, especially in the lights of the Black Lives Matter movement, has really shown to us some of the inequities that have been exacerbated as well by COVID. I think developing cultural safety, developing the diversity of thought, promoting a respectful and accessible environment is really key. As a person of color myself, I really acknowledge the hardships that we continue to face, and I would like to amplify the voices of these student groups and students to seek equity, fight for social justice, as well as social wellness. It's a key part of my platform.
Okay, in the interest of time, we might have to move on before Jake can answer that question. Unfortunately, Jake, if you're okay, maybe you can message that person or let answer that question on social media or something.
Yeah, sure. I'm not sure what the name of the person was, but please tell me. My DMs are open, and I do have an answer lined up.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, and now we'll move on to closing statements. So, Darshan, if you want to go first.
Sure. First of all, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you to Election SMU and the papers for covering this debate. It's really been a pleasure talking to all of you and to put forward my candidacy. Fundamentally, I believe that the SMU needs to expand in its operations, following through with the 5-year plan to greatly benefit the student body. As a union of 24,000 students, I think my vision is to continue to support and empower the efforts to enhance our student experience and act in solidarity with student advocacy by marginalized students as well. I think when we establish a institutional relationship built on trust, we will continue to remain a strong community that can better advocate for our interests. And through this, I will work hard to fight for fair academic justice processes, accessible learning policies that will be much needed for the transition to in-person learning. I would like to thank Jake for putting forward his candidacy as well as Mark. And I think that ultimately we can make SMU what it can be. The SMU has potential, and I look forward to your vote, and I'm counting on you. Thank you so much.
Jake, feel free.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure fielding all your questions. And I know I've already spent all this time harping on my points, but ultimately, I hope to really just dedicate my experience to a SMU that does the most good possible for our students. One that's going to keep us safe as we emerge from this pandemic. One that stands up for our values, especially those of our most marginalized students. And one that offers meaningful and tangible improvements to the student experience. We want one that stands up for our values at every level. Ultimately, my platform is one for which I've consulted for a couple months now with knowledgeable individuals, including faculty presidents, every SMU executive, and numerous individuals in services and grassroots initiatives. So I want to throw out a huge thank you to all of them who contributed to these ideas and have contributed to my knowledge on these issues, as well as all of my members of my campaign team who have been assisting me in this effort. I also want to thank Darshan for the truly incredible campaign that he's been putting forward in the last couple of days. I'm ultimately, proud of my experience, and I hope to apply it in your service. And I'm incredibly excited at the platform, at the positive change that I think this platform could bring to our student body. So I hope you will entrust me with that duty, and I hope you have a lovely night. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you both. And now we'll be moving on to our last segment, VP Student Life.
Oh, there we go. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. So, hi everyone. Bonsoir tous. I am Carla Jaiso Cubilla. I go by she, her, elle pronouns. And when I started my degree at McGill, I felt real overwhelmed. Not only being part of this university imposes a significant weight on our mental health, but it also places emphasis on having a competitive professional portfolio. And you have made an incredible effort to be a McGill student, and now you deserve to have the absolute best support and resources. So I want to make sure that there are mental support and resources that are representative of the diversity we are lucky to have at McGill, made available immediately and brought directly to you when you need them. I want to provide alternative and accessible childcare for student parents, and I also want to give you access to free workshops and services with a certificate proving completion to enhance your professional portfolio. With the adequate support and resources, I will help you ensure a healthy and successful future for all of us. I'm committed to being your advocate and champion to elevate your McGill experience.
Great, thank you so much. So now we'll take a question from, two questions, pardon me, from the current executive. So Maheen, if you want to ask away.
Yeah, thanks so much, Pooja. So my first question is, you mentioned wanting to create accessible workshops that students can attend for professional development. How is that different from the mini courses that the SMU has traditionally offered?
Thank you, Maheen, for your question. So first of all, mini courses, you have to pay for them. And also I know that execs get workshops, but only a few of them have to attend, and I attended those. And by having certifiable workshops, you can go to these workshops, pay attention, and get a certificate, and actually use it in your CV and enhance your professional development. So I just, from my personal experience, I know that people who go to these workshops don't usually pay attention to them because there's not much interaction in those. So I really wanted to have this platform so everyone can access these workshops and actually use them in their future development.
Great, Maheen, if you want to move on to your next question.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Pooja. So my second question is, the VP Student Life is responsible for mediation of conflict within and between clubs and services. How would you handle interpersonal conflicts between two executives if they approach you to step in?
So first of all, with my experience as a VP, projects and events at SLASA, I had a lot of moments where I had to do this. And it's complicated, especially when you have personal relations to people. But coming with a head of, okay, we need to solve this because there's two executives, it's gonna really impact how things come out. So just being able to approach things with a whole head and being able to represent students and find the best solution so everyone is happy, so everyone is safe, so everyone feels represented, I think has to be done when there's conflict.
All right. So now we're going to move on to a question from the SMUian.
Hi, the question we had for you was, considering the Student Life portfolio has the largest number of employees, mostly from services, which are semi-autonomous, how do you intend to support not only services in their autonomy, but the unique needs of services employees?
Thank you for your question. So first of all, communication is lacking a lot, and I've been realizing that although the executives from now are doing a great job, there needs to be more of first-hand communication with services, with clubs, with ISGs, to understand what they're going through and also see what needs to be improved and what has not worked in the past. So communication is the key in making sure that everyone's rights are being respected and that everyone's happy within their jobs.
Great, all right. So now we'll be moving on to questions from the online forum. All right. So, you suggest making alternative daycare available to student parents at McGill. Why do you believe an alternative is necessary, given that undergraduate parents are given first priority for spots at the SSMU daycare? Do you believe their needs are not being met by the SSMU daycare?
I believe their needs are not being met. There's a long wait list right now, and it's incredibly underfunded at the moment. So I feel like with the program I wanted to initiate here was allowing students to provide help to the educators at the daycare in order to increase the amount of kids that can be part of the daycare and also to enhance their professional portfolio. So I think that there's not a lot of attention being brought to student parents, and that's why that was one of my main points in my platforms.
Next question. Should student leaders be able to accept high-value gifts such as trips from outside groups? Why or why not?
They shouldn't. I believe that it's important to have a critical thinking when it comes to issues, political issues, social issues. I believe that outside from being part of an executive, you as a human being, when it comes to issues that are political, you need to be able to make your mind. You need to be able to research, to make sure that you're not just following websites, to make sure that you're not just paying attention to what people are saying, to make sure that you're educating yourself. And I think at McGill, we are all capable of critical thinking. So if someone wants to accept that, it's up to you. It's your critical thinking is your life. So that will be my answer to that.
And our last question from the online forum. How will you address clubs, services, and student groups who do not share your same political beliefs? Will your political beliefs impact how they are served by you?
So first of all, my personal views, my personal political views are not in the portfolio. And the portfolio doesn't ask what Carla thinks. I'm going to be representing students. I'm going to be representing you. So depending on what you feel and what you think is necessary, that's what I will do for you. My personal views have nothing to do with them. And if you want to chat with it personally, you can come to me. But when you represent people, and me representing the Spanish Latin American Student Association, my political views have definitely not been a part of my decision in anything.
All right, so now we'll get to move on to audience questions. So again, please use the raise hand function and we will acknowledge them. Okay, I'm gonna try and call on people who haven't spoken yet. So Z?
Yeah, so looking at your platform, you mentioned that you want to strengthen your work, the connection with the Student Wellness Hub. I'm just curious what exactly you want to do, and especially where the voices of marginalized students fit into that plan.
Perfect. Love your question. Actually, right now, there's a division with students and the mental health. I think lots of work can be done to connect those two, but it hasn't been done so successfully. So for me, I wanted to use the mental health commissioner, the mental health advocacy coordinator, and the outreach coordinator to make sure that students are being heard. Because what most people are saying to me now is like, no one's listening to me. And I'm like, why? There's something, the bridge is not being built here. So we need to tackle that. And for me, I want to see diverse backgrounds. I want to be able to find professionals that are Latino like me so I can feel represented. And with digital platforms, it's going to be actually launched at the end of the semester. We're going to be able to achieve that, to make sure that everyone can find the resources and find everything, all the support they need in there that represents them.
All right. Okay, I guess we'll go back to someone who's already spoken. Lauren?
All right, perfect. Hi, Carla. Thank you very much for your answers. So I know you've already spoken about this, about your own political beliefs not interacting with the beliefs of the student life, but do you think that the role of the VP Student Life is a political position?
So I remember actually Eric mentioned this. I think everything is political, but when you are representing a large amount of people, you need to put your politics aside. You need to listen to what your constituents want, to what student wants. You can't just focus on what you think because that's not what the role is for. So although, like I said, we all hold our personal politics, and politics is a huge part of our lives, I guess. We do need to represent the people that we're working for. We can't just come in and bring our own beliefs into the matter.
Okay, great. Since we're doing well on time, I'll take one more question from Julia.
Sorry, I muted myself again once you unmuted me. Thanks for all your answers, Carla. One question I have, since you're running uncontested for this role, what actions, both in the campaign and moving forward, will you take to make sure that your projects and your work reflects needs and wishes from all students, and that they still feel they have a voice and an accurate representation in the student government in this role?
Thank you so much for your question. I was actually thinking a lot about this. Right now, there's not a lot of communication between clubs, and I actually reached out to most of them, and they are eager to talk to you about what they want to improve and what needs to be better. And Claire mentioned this earlier, that people are eager to tell you how they feel, and we're not reaching out to them. So I want to do that. I want to connect with people one-on-one, and there is the time. I have the time because I'm passionate about what I'm doing, and we need to hear what people think. We need to hear what people's concerns are in order to represent them properly. Because if I come to a platform and just do whatever I think is best, it's not going to work. There needs to be an open communication with students in order to have the best student life possible. So communication is going to be my #1 priority if I get elected. And even in my candidacy, I've been communicating with everyone a lot.
Great, thank you. So now we'll move on to your closing statement. You have 1 minute.
Coming to McGill is not just about signing up for classes and being on your way. Student life is a huge part of it. And in order for you to have the best McGill experience, you need resources that are safe, accessible, sustainable, and barrier-free. I am passionate about making sure all these aspects of student life are protected, and this is why I have centered my focus around important pillars to elevating your student life: mental health, childcare, student clubs, and professional development. On March 16th to the 19th, I invite you to vote for me as your VP Student Life. You have worked really hard to be where you are now, so let me elevate your McGill experience. I want to thank all of you for staying here and listening to me. I know I was the last one, and I know we lost a bunch of people, but thank you so much for staying here. And if you have any questions or just want to chat to me, you can reach me anywhere, basically. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Carla. And that's a wrap on our end. Thank you so much to every single person who's come out to the debate today. We really appreciate all of you sticking around with us. As a reminder, voting opens tomorrow at 9 a.m. and runs till Friday at 5 p.m. You not only voting for the executive election, but also the winter referendum. Be sure to check out all the questions on the ballot there. And thank you so much, everyone. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to email me or Ben at elections@smu.ca or deo@smu.ca.